The dust of exile is heavy, and silence fills the scorched valley where the bones lie. Each piece is a reminder of stories that were never told, faith that was lost, and futures that were never realized. It is a stillness that is full of cortisol and sadness, and the nervous system is always on edge. The fall of Babylon is both a historical event that ended the light and a deeply personal one, as every spirit is a reflection of modern despair. The bones shine in the sun, which doesn't give them any comfort. But in the middle of all this emptiness, the whisper of God's presence stirs, just out of reach. Emptiness is not the end. Absence is what makes intervention possible. And that's how the journey starts. In this gentle, meditative reading of Ezekiel, we walk through the valley of dry bones, a profound metaphor for anxiety, spiritual exhaustion, and the feeling that hope is completely gone. Let the soft, soothing narration and peaceful background sounds calm your mind and quiet your fears. This is the scripture you need when your soul feels dry and you need God to breathe life back into your spirit. Press play, find your rest, and let the divine breath restore you. Ezekiel's old home is no longer there. The beating heart of Jerusalem, a city of stone, song, and holy promise, is now quiet. Under foreign skies, by the slow-moving waters of Babylon, people wander inward through landscapes of memory and desire. Exile is not just leaving a place, it's cutting off your identity. It's a slow collapse that happens not in fire and battle, but in the slow loss of spirit and meaning. Ezekiel's exile means losing everything he knows, the rhythms of worship, the voices of family, and the daily dance of the marketplace, as if they had all vanished into the sky. He wakes up every day in a place that feels both real and unreal, and he hears the new silence that is spreading through the group. Conversations stop, and laughter dies quickly. As hope fades, friends turn into strangers, and the language of suffering becomes part of every gesture and look. The body remembers things that the mind wants to forget. Ezekiel can feel it in the tightness of his muscles, the shallow patterns of his breath, and the way his heart races at every new sound. Home should be a safe place, but here in Babylon, even the air feels dangerous. There is suspicion behind every smile, and the chill of loss behind every act of kindness. So begins the mind's exile, a journey through the wreckage of old truths, where all that can be found are broken signs and echoes from far away. Identity itself becomes hard to pin down. Ezekiel's name used to mean something: priest, son, voice of tradition. Now it feels transparent, spectral, as if spoken across a chasm that only grows wider. The stories that used to be told around fires and at dinner tables become legendary, even though the youngest ones start to forget them. The elders desperately try to piece together the meaning of the rituals with whatever prayers and songs they can find. But the gods of Babylon are everywhere, and strange rituals are getting too close, threatening to drown the fragile roots of faith. What does it mean to belong when everything you know has been taken away? Ezekiel has sleepless nights because he is wrestling with questions that are both old and new. Fear seems to have set up camp next to his soul, and anxiety is always on his mind. He feels torn between remembering and forgetting, between facing the pain and blocking it out. Every choice is risky. Too much memory makes the pain go away. If you don't have enough, the self disappears and becomes blurry. For the exiles, despair is threatening to become the new normal. But in the heaviness, there are times when strength shines through. Children who make up new games using old songs, old people who share whispered blessings over small meals, and strangers who become family just by living. There is still a tiny glimmer of hope in these small acts. Ezekiel learns how to be patient. The deep absence turns into a kind of presence, a state of readiness. He listens in the quiet, not for the past to come back, but for the soft sound of what might still happen. The land is empty, and the bones of memory are scattered and dry. But in the emptiness, Ezekiel feels an invitation to live in the space that loss has opened up, to believe that the silence might hold the first sounds of something new. The mind is exiled after the body, and then the heart is exiled. But exile isn't forever. Memory, like Jerusalem, can grow from despair, quietly planting its seeds beneath the dust. Longing and questions that last longer than the answers shape each day. During this time of waiting, Ezekiel becomes both a watcher and a witness to a people who are lost, and to faith that is still alive, but not anchored. There is loss, but there is also the chance that this empty space is the start of something new. The valley stretches out in front of me, huge and unyielding, like a landscape that is neither fully alive nor fully dead. Here, scattered bones are more than just signs of destruction. They are the shapes of memory, the shapes of a trauma that is so deep it can't be named out loud. Ezekiel stands at the door, and with him, everyone who has ever been exiled enters this valley. It is both a mental and physical wasteland. The valley and the mind are not far apart. The dry bones we see are a reflection of the broken pieces of ourselves that we left behind in chaos. The trauma of exile doesn't just go away. It settles in and builds layers of fear, numbness, and the constant pain of being exposed. In this field, every bone shows how weak people are and how easily they can break when they lose something. Ezekiel, who saw the destruction, feels the sharp edges of despair. There is no hope for rescue. When you look at the valley, you face the rawness of brokenness, the feeling that nothing can be hidden and nothing can be fixed by sheer willpower. In the valley, one is bare before the truth of suffering. Everything is bare. Grief has taken away all the masks, and now there is only the chance of being truly seen. But in this space, a strange paradox becomes clear. The bones are out in the open, where the sun, wind, and eyes can see them, but they still stay. Their endurance is dignified, a quiet testament to the strength of survival even when things fall apart. Trauma turns each person into a field of bones that are scattered but never gone. To be in the valley is to understand not only loss, but also the unfathomable ability to stay there day after day. The valley makes it hard to believe that you are alone in your pain. Ezekiel sees not only his own pain, but also the pain of many others. Each exile is a unique map of scars, and each survivor is a reminder of the fall of the community. The field goes quiet, watching as the exiled people carry the heavy burden of history and the lighter, sometimes hidden threads of hope. Being exposed in the valley is not a sign of defeat. It is the first brave thing you need to do. Ezekiel hears the silence and knows that trauma pushes people apart, but also brings them together. Brokenness doesn't completely cut people off. Instead, it makes it possible for those who are suffering to really see each other and, maybe God. The valley acts as a mirror, a place where each sad person can see reflections of strength and meaning that connect old wounds to futures they never thought possible. Crossing the valley means putting yourself at risk of being seen. You can't hide here or rush past the pain, but the risk itself changes things. Those who are there share a psychological space, a valley of dry bones, a field of trauma that lets them feel deeply, grieve, and hope, even if it's only for a short time. The field is waiting. In this state of vulnerability, the chance of return is ready not as a return from exile, but as the rise of something new from what was thought to be dead. Not a sound, but a question breaks the valley's silence. It is a question that is heavy with divine inquiry and hangs between earth and eternity. Can these bones come back to life? The voice is soft and clear, ringing out in the empty spaces of the heart and the landscape. It is meant for Ezekiel, but it somehow gets through to everyone, breaking through the illusions of control and certainty. Ezekiel is frozen in place, surrounded by signs of death. It's not just about the bones. It's about everyone who has been through a collapse and anyone who has lost hope. What can be done when there is no longer a chance for people? The bones are dry not only because of their shape, but also because of the stories they used to tell, the dreams, the prayers, and the very pulse of who they are. Now everything is quiet in the dust. There is life before despair and what might come after it. The question divides time. Ezekiel feels the weight of his people's past on his shoulders, the long history of pain and faith, sin and forgiveness, exile and longing for home. The question is not a rhetorical one. It is a call to face the limits of human vision and admit that there are horizons we can't cross on our own. Ezekiel wants to answer with logic and what he can see. No, the bones are dead and dry. There is no coming back. But the question isn't looking for a report. It makes you think and fight with the last thread of faith. His humble response, "Sovereign Lord, you alone know," becomes the refrain of those who are on the edge of the impossible. The surrender is not giving up, but the first step toward hope, the willingness to accept the mystery at the heart of restoration. This is the point where people give up and God can do something. When God asks the question, He doesn't just want people to be hopeful, He wants them to be open to the possibility of new things happening when the past says no. The valley becomes a stage for this confrontation. The failure of human control gives way to the belief that something bigger might choose to step in. The effect on the mind is very strong. When you are asked to hope when it seems impossible, it is like an inner revolution. It puts a lot of stress on the mind because it requires a leap of faith that something good may still happen. For Ezekiel and anyone else who is in exile, being asked the impossible question is a sign of love and an offer to work together to make things better. The bones are still, but the field of death has moved. It now has a question that shines with promise. So the valley waits, caught between what is and what could be. The question lingers, turning despair into hope. Can these bones live? It's the first breath of possibility, the huge opening of the unknown. After the impossible question, there is a need for a new posture, not one of giving up, but one of being ready. For Ezekiel, the void is not just nothingness. It is a call to action, to stand up and speak when it seems pointless to do so. The world of bones is still quiet, but the message is clear. Prophesy to these bones. To prophesy is not just to predict or describe. It is to breathe life into something that doesn't exist yet. This command comes at a point where people are torn between giving up and following orders. There is no guarantee with it, and there are no signs of life in the dust. The valley stays the same as Ezekiel's voice gets ready to break the silence. Talking into nothingness takes all the courage exile has left. It's a leap of faith that words can break the silence, and that sound itself holds the seeds of creation. It is the tension between hope and humility, to speak because one must, not because evidence requires it. Here, prophecy as a spiritual discipline becomes a physical act. Ezekiel must use not only his mind, but also his body, his breath, vocal cords, and all of his senses must work together in a gesture of partnership with the divine. The posture is straight and attentive, and the voice is steady even when the heart is racing. Prophetic posture is a stance of defiance against the logic of absence. It represents a creative rejection of the finality of despair. The emptiness, which was just filled with the weight of death, turns into a place where people can act. Ezekiel learns that to prophesy is to take ownership of his own despair and refuse to be passive even when there is a lot of evidence to the contrary. In that holy place, the mind itself changes, centers of agency wake up, and neural patterns that had settled in defeat become open to new possibilities. Speaking breaks up resignation and encourages the listener to help restore hope. Ezekiel's voice echoes through the valley, and even before a single bone moves, the act of prophecy changes reality. Talking into nothingness is not a waste of breath. It is the start of healing and working together with what can't be seen. In the prophetic stance, giving up and being strong come together. The void is no longer just a place of loss. It is now a place to be brave. The valley changes as the last echoes fade away. It's not alive yet, but it's already different. The prophetic voice has struck flint on stone. The first thing that happens when the dawn comes is that people talk in the void. Dryness is more than just being dead. It's a state that is deeper, heavier, and more permanent than death. The bones Ezekiel sees in the valley didn't just die. Their vital essence left a long time ago, leaving only brittle witnesses to an old fight. Death holds on to the memory of life and the pain of what was. When even memory has faded and hope and identity have disappeared, all that is left is dryness, which is what it means to survive beyond purpose. What makes bones dry instead of just dead? Death, in its initial instance, constitutes interruption, a pulse stilled, a breath unraveled, a narrative truncated. There are still signs of life, like muscle, blood, and the feelings of those who are still alive. Dryness, on the other hand, is the process that takes place over time, the systematic erasure of story, function, meaning, and connection. Bones dry out when they are always exposed to the wind and sun. The marrow is gone, and their strength is just a memory. For the exiles, dryness is the result of waiting, hoping, and trying to avoid despair year after year. It is the slow fading of community, the quiet thinning of spirit, and the loss of rituals that used to keep faith alive. Deadness can be a threshold, a moment before change, or a break before new life. Dryness is the reality that never ends and has no end or promise. It is the end of all possibilities. Ezekiel can see the difference, not just with his eyes, but also in the mood of the people around him. The dead still feel the pain of unfinished business and the memories that come with it. When even longing seems useless, the dry are what is left. At the end, dry bones mean facing total emptiness, no more tears, no more prayers, and no hope for things to get better. But this is where the story asks its hardest question. Can dryness be reversed? Being dry doesn't mean you'll never find your way back. In theology, dryness is the stage before the spirit moves. Psychologically, it is the recognition of complete exhaustion, an honesty that comes before hope returns. Ezekiel is standing in the valley like a witness, not running away in fear, but looking honestly at the destruction that is left behind. The bones are dry, which makes the miracle's weight even heavier when it comes. Dryness is bad for memory and continuity, but in some strange way, it is also preparation. The field of dry bones is a blank canvas on which the story of restoration can be told in new ways. Loss has its limits, and when it reaches them, something changes. The bones becoming dry makes it possible for someone to step in. There would be no way to measure the depth of renewal or the return without dryness. To name the dryness in the valley is to honor it. It means to refuse both despair and sentimentality, and to see what is really at stake. The witness stands still, feeling the weight, sensing the chance, and waiting for the breath to come back. The prophecy comes true. But Ezekiel's story reveals a more personal valley. When loss becomes more than just a group thing, when it happens to his own house and heart, the story takes on a new level. Ezekiel's wife, the delight of his eyes, is taken from him in an instant. Grief rushes in but is kept at the gate, unspoken and forbidden. The person who gives a nation hope now walks through a valley where even mourning is not allowed. This is not the public grief of a funeral and embrace, but the silence of internal collapse. God tells Ezekiel not to show his sadness on the outside or take part in the rituals and ceremonies of crying. By following orders, Ezekiel shows how numb exile can make you feel. The pain is too deep for words, and the trauma is so fresh that even crying is not allowed. His voice, which has always been a way to see and hear, must now be silent, swallowing pain and reflecting the silent suffering of his people. Ezekiel becomes the valley in this personal despair. His pain is no longer just a theory or a metaphor. It is real, a prophet being stabbed by the same sword that kills his people. The stress is almost too much to handle. He was called to witness, to speak, and now he is being asked to hold back his own cries. Pain, when pushed down, becomes a seed of sadness deep inside. The price of his job is high, and here it hurts the most. But even this personal valley has meaning. Ezekiel's silence, though it may seem harsh, is a message for the exiles. There are times when suffering goes against ritual, and when groups of people trying to comfort each other fall apart under the weight of unimaginable loss. The prophet's silence reflects Israel's own inability to mourn the past. As they drift without roots, their identities shaken and their futures uncertain. But when you look closely at desolation, you can see more of what God wants. There is a mysterious unity in the command to be quiet. God's own grief, which is silent and unspoken, mixes with that of the prophet and the people. Ezekiel, in his most silent suffering, carries the pain of his people in his hand. His silent suffering makes it hard to tell where personal loss ends and group loss begins. The story doesn't end here, though, in this silence. The divine does not go away even when mourning folds in on itself. The valley is still empty, but the promise is still there. Something unnamed waits to be spoken in Ezekiel's personal suffering, just as it does in the nations. It is a faint possibility that is still formless and out of reach of grief. Hopelessness is not simply the lack of optimism. In the theology of exile, hopelessness transforms into a distinct spiritual state, a convergence of the burdens of history, faith, and promise with the abyss. Ezekiel's valley is not only a psychological terrain, but also a theological one, where the norms of expectation are redefined and the limits of belief are challenged at their periphery. In the ancient Near East, the afterlife is not a place of hope, but a dark place where the dead go to Sheol, an underworld of silence, darkness, and forgetting. For Israel, the promise of resurrection remains incomplete. The soul quakes in the face of uncertainty, constrained by tradition yet forsaken by the assurance of future restoration. The exile makes this trembling worse because people learn what it feels like to be theologically hopeless. They suspect that things won't get better, and maybe they can't. In this setting, hope is both a tradition and a contradiction. Israel's stories have always been full of doubt, with times when God was silent, long nights of waiting and wandering in the wilderness. But hope is the heartbeat of biblical faith, a pulse that stays strong even when its rhythm falters because of outside problems. Ezekiel's vision makes this stance more difficult. The prophet must face a reality in which hope may appear not only improbable, but theologically unattainable, surrounded by the deceased. Doubt and despair are related but not the same. Doubt is the questioning that makes you want to get more involved, like wrestling with angels or asking for meaning from silence. Despair is when you can't even think about getting involved. The bones in the valley show Ezekiel this change. Doubt creeps in around the edges of tradition, looking for proof. When the tradition itself turns away, despair sets in. The question, can these bones live? The question is made sharper by the fact that, for the first time, there doesn't seem to be a good answer. The unique thing about Israel's theology is that it is full of paradoxes. For example, it chooses to hope against hope and believes in the possibility of restoration even when the framework itself is silent. The distinct pressure of exile manifests not only as trauma, but also as a strain on tradition, language, and the mechanisms of collective memory. Ezekiel is pushed to the edge where words break, and ritual seems to lose its power. In ancient thought, Sheol is the end of the line, not a place to go back to. Ezekiel's vision, on the other hand, pushes this limit by asking if God could reach even the darkest places, breaking the rules of finality. Israel's theodicy is distinct in that it relies not on myth or inherited cosmology, but on the direct, spontaneous interaction between God and the afflicted individuals. The valley serves as a laboratory for improbable faith, a crucible for a theology that audaciously creates restoration from despair. Here, hopelessness isn't sin or failure. It's facing the truth honestly, feeling like God and the future aren't there. But even this is okay in the story. Ezekiel is allowed and even forced to name the emptiness, to talk about his sadness and to take the chance that hope might not work out. Here, religion may seem to bend, stretch, or even break, but only to make room for a hope that goes beyond all traditions. Despair, though old in language and lasting in the soul, is also written in the brain's circuits. Modern neuroscience has identified what Ezekiel's valley illustrates. The body's chemistry and the mind's patterns can become ensnared in cycles that resemble spiritual desolation, exacerbating the feelings of exile and emptiness experienced by the exiles in corporeal form. A small gland called the adrenal cortex is at the center of this condition. It releases cortisol, which is the chemical sign of stress. When hope fades and problems seem impossible to avoid, cortisol flows all day and night. It is supposed to help, but it slowly hurts health, memory, and mood. This is the first time scientists have seen learned helplessness, the point at which someone stops trying, not because they can't escape, but because they feel like their efforts are pointless. In these situations, the animal inside the cage stays still, powerless and resigned, even when the cage door is open. For people who are going through long-term problems like exile, grief, poverty, or depression, the cycle runs deep. Fear and disappointment carve neural pathways every day, making habits that make people expect that nothing good will happen. The nervous system gets used to being alone, and the body gets ready for pain when it doesn't have enough. In Ezekiel's valley, this is reflected in every bone that has been exposed for a long time and every heart that is tired of wanting. The chemistry of despair turns into a spiritual home, and the brain's valley state fits with the biblical metaphor. Science talks about another level called the default mode network, or DMN. This group of brain areas controls memory, self-story, and reflection. In healthy minds, it connects personal meaning to the past and the future. But when you're sad, especially when you're depressed, the DMN gets too active and keeps replaying losses, failures, stories of being abandoned, or guilt. It turns the wheel of rumination. The mind turns into a hall of mirrors with no way out. This maze of neural overdrive is where old prayers for help and new treatments for depression come together. The valley state of the brain is not just a metaphor or an illusion. It has proof, something real. Cortisol weakens resilience, and the DMN confines imagination in a cycle of perpetual self-examination. Exile, trauma, and spiritual devastation are no longer just social or emotional events. They are now biological scripts. When people are sad, they may blame themselves for not having enough character or faith. Ezekiel's vision and neuroscience together say something else. Persistent emptiness is a pattern, a storm in the brain as much as in the spirit. But if despair can take hold so deeply, both science and scripture say that there is a way out. Neuroplasticity, or the brain's ability to rewire itself, makes it possible for change to happen slowly. Just like bones can take in new breath, circuits in the mind can respond to even the smallest movements of hope. Intervention, spiritual, relational, medical, can disrupt the patterns. You can picture the valley in your mind, but it can change. The presence of another person, the introduction of a new word, or a gesture of faith or care can help calm the DMN, lower the chemical toll, and give people back their sense of control. In Ezekiel's story, despair is voiced and confronted without hesitation, yet it does not constitute the concluding sound in the narrative. Science, too, does not conclude in despair. Despair is real, valid, and heavy, but even in the deepest neural valley, there is still a chance of movement. Restoration, whether divine or clinical, commences with the recognition and identification of patterns, followed by a tentative breath that challenges their grip. There is a special time at the edge of restoration when the silence is broken and the ground starts to shake. Ezekiel's vision shows that the valley's stillness is broken not by a gentle return, but by a loud rumble. Bones clattering, dust rising, and the unmistakable sound of change. This isn't quiet healing. It's an explosion, a necessary shaking that has to happen before anything new can be born. The sudden noise scares the exiles, who are used to being numb and knowing what to expect. It looks like restoration isn't just a neat reversal of decline. First, there is chaos. The valley, which has long been a place of sadness and pain, is now a place of movement, with bones snapping together, sinews appearing, and flesh covering the skeletons. This visceral choreography is unpredictable and uncomfortable. It breaks down the routines built around loss and absence and the ability to handle pain. The sound and the shake are not just parts of the story. They are also events that happen in the brain and mind. In silence, the mind can become inflexible, with devotion turning into worry and despair turning into grim expectation. But when noise comes in and shakes us up, taking away our easy sense of certainty, new possibilities arise. The brain, which has been trained to expect the same things over and over, has to react to sudden changes. In this chaos, old paths disappear and new ones start to take shape. For Ezekiel, prophecy is realized through sensation. The message is not only spoken but also felt. Sound vibrates in the air, and movement flows through the bones in the dust. Restoration begins with disturbance. The disturbance of comfort with emptiness. The challenge to acknowledge that interruption is necessary prior to renewal. The shaking of bones is like the shaking of faith, the willingness to think about things that seemed impossible. It is the first neurological shock that breaks the cycle of hopelessness. There is something similar in medical research. Stress breaks the brain's ability to predict things, which makes people rethink their old habits. Neuroplasticity, or change at the cellular level, often starts with a crisis. when noise and movement seem like too much to handle. Old networks stop working and new synapses start working. The chaos of restoration is necessary. There is no way to avoid it. The new life can only take root when things go wrong. The valley's shake is not only fear, it is also opportunity. It says that trauma and routine don't have the last word and that the future won't look like the past. Ezekiel talks about this with awe and humility, knowing that the magic of restoration isn't in bringing back everything that was lost, but in letting go of the things that have kept life away. Change is hard and healing is loud. To enter restoration is to accept chaos, the promise of short-term pain for long-term change. The sound and the shake signal the arrival of hope for the exiles and for anyone who hears it, not as peace but as revolution. Bones clatter, sinews stretch, and shapes come out of the chaos. There is always this line in spiritual and mental life: chaos before creation, breaking before building, and noise before music. It's not just the dead who are disturbed in Ezekiel's valley. The living are too. The vision says we need to be shaken out of our despair, woken up from our numbness and startled into being ready to breathe. Chaos becomes a creative act, the unpredictable path to renewal. Restoration begins with noise, with discomfort, with sudden change, and with the strong promise that things will never be the same. After the chaos and noise, a new order forms, bones find each other, and connections are made with care and purpose. This is not random healing. It is assembly, a guided reconstitution of form. Every piece has to find its place, and every fragment has to go back to doing what it was meant to do. The careful joining of bones to bones is both a physical event and a spiritual metaphor. It says that restoration has its own rules and discipline. Ezekiel sees the reassembly and realizes that restoration is not magic, but a process. It takes time, focus, and a promise to respect the shape of what was and what needs to be. Spiritual formation is similar to this work. Beliefs, memories, and hopes must all be gathered, looked at closely, and put back in order. The valley, which used to be a place of brokenness and lost potential, is now a workshop of careful work. The joining of bone to bone reverberates through every life affected by trauma. Healing takes time. Every step must be planned, taking into account how different each fracture and wound is. As bones come back together, shapes take shape not by rushing but by carefully figuring out what really goes together. In spiritual terms, this is the slow process of rebuilding core beliefs, getting back the confidence that was lost, and reshaping your sense of self. This process is also about making things different. The new body isn't just a shapeless mass. It keeps the marks of each person's identity while coming together as a whole. Each bone is put back to work, but now it helps the whole structure. This kind of attention to structure is also important for psychological healing. It means bringing together broken memories, emotions, abilities, and beliefs into a strong, unified self. Ezekiel feels the spiritual energy. What was once hopelessly scattered is now being brought together piece by piece for a purpose. God's work is intentional, respecting both independence and togetherness. Restoration is more than just going back to what was. It's the art of making new meaning from old pieces and making something whole that wasn't there before. This law of assembly gives the exiles a lot of hope. Everyone needs to learn how to belong again, one connection at a time. Community is reforged, not as a mass of unnamed faces, but as a complex group of people whose restoration depends on exact reconnection. The law of assembly makes it clear that healing is a process that happens over time and with other people. Hurrying the process can cause more damage. Being patient lets real strength grow. As sinews, flesh, and identity get ready to come back, the assembled skeleton stands between death and new life. The valley, which is now well organized, is proof of the miracle of careful, patient restoration. What was once shapeless in dust now points forward, ready, but not yet alive, with a structure that is complete and waiting for breath. Restoration is not just going back. It is putting things back together, getting back to discipline, process, and connection. The law of assembly is the first principle by which the valley's promise takes shape. This promise says that wholeness is not only possible, but also unavoidable for those who are willing to wait, rebuild, and connect. As sinews and flesh knit themselves over bone, restoration gets deeper. What used to be a skeleton now has the substance of real-life soft tissues reconnect, and strength and flexibility come back. It is a renewal of both poetry and biology. Sinews connect things that were separate, flesh covers things that were bare, and a body starts to take shape. Ezekiel's vision goes from structure to function, from living alone to being part of a community. Healing is not being alone. It is coming back together. The sinews and flesh stand in for relationships and support systems, which are the ties that make any restoration last. Every exile must relearn how to be a part of something bigger, how to go from being alone in their loss to being part of something bigger. The bones that were once scattered in the valley now show the miracle of coming together. People come back together, and the broken fabric of togetherness is sewn back together. For those who have been stuck in cycles of despair for a long time, sinews and flesh mean more than just staying alive. They show that tenderness can come after violence and that trust can be rebuilt when there was only doubt. Sinews let the body move, which lets it work together. Flesh provides protection, beauty, and warmth, a restoration of the completeness that fear and loss previously removed. The lesson for the exiles, and for anyone who has been through trauma, is clear. True healing comes from connection. Spiritual support systems are very important. Belonging happens slowly, with moments of awkwardness, uncertainty, and vulnerability, followed by the gradual coming together of shared hope. Relationships connect people in the same way that sinews connect bones. Healing requires us to embrace our own wholeness and to permit others to participate in our journey. The Valley of Dry Bones serves as a classroom for rediscovering intimacy. Ezekiel sees lifeless figures come to life, ready to move and reach for each other. Every person who has been exiled has scars, and every person who comes back has some of the isolation that they left behind. But when they come together, the body is healed. This is the body of belonging, the place where wounds are seen, treated, and given time to heal. The sinews and flesh are signs of a restoration that is both physical and emotional. Coming back to the community after being alone is always hard. Old wounds may reopen, trust must be rebuilt, and the process is often uncomfortable. But restoration is still not complete without sinews and flesh, without support and a real connection. Ezekiel's vision shows that being whole is something that everyone can do together. The miracle is not just that bones connect, but that the softness of care and the strength of relational bonds hold everything together. There is always a risk in spiritual belonging, but it is the only way to find lasting hope. As the body stands, sinews twitch and flesh stretches in readiness. Movement will soon resume, and voices will soon return. The valley, which used to be a graveyard, is now full of potential and the promise that real life must include acceptance and support from others. This is the turning point in every journey of healing, when we go from being alone to being able to be together. The sinews and flesh of Ezekiel's vision invite every broken spirit to be touched, held, and welcomed back. Healing is never just for one person. It is always connected to others and grows. The valley has changed, not just because life has come back, but also because a community has formed a place to belong, ready for breath. The valley has changed, but it is still not alive. Bones are connected, sinews hold them together, and flesh covers the shape. The structure becomes whole, but there is an emptiness that is more unsettling than desolation. The uncanny valley where everything seems to be back to normal, but the spirit is missing. Ezekiel sees bodies stop in their near completion, as if everyone is holding their breath. The miracle comes to an end. It shows life without energy and presence without movement. This break shows a deep truth about restoration. Form alone is not enough. Even if the body is put together perfectly, it is worth nothing without the spirit that gives it life. In the valley, what used to be a bunch of things has turned into an army that can't move or make decisions. Life has not come back, but structure has. This state is tiring. The discipline of rebuilding can feel like a burden when you don't have enough energy. To be nearly complete yet devoid of life is to experience the anguish of incompletion more acutely than the sorrow of loss. The uncanny valley is a psychological and spiritual space that anyone who has rebuilt after a difficult time and still can't find meaning knows well. The routines of community, the semblance of health, and the expressions of faith and service may all be reinstated. yet the heart remains mute. The surface is alive, and the shape suggests what it does, but the soul, ruach, spirit, is missing. This is what it feels like to live with form, but not fulfillment, and to have rebuilt only to find a new kind of emptiness. There is a reason why Ezekiel's vision is so tense here. The most important part of life is not how it looks, but what it is. The exiles' bodies are waiting for a word, a wind, or a breath from the other side. The lesson is clear. No matter how hard we try, we can't make things whole just by working hard. Acknowledging this limitation is not a failure. Rather, it signifies a commencement, an invitation to aspire for what cannot be manufactured. The indwelling of the spirit, the transcendent gift. In the uncanny valley, the people who are there must face the emptiness of structure without spirit and routine, without inner fire. Here, nothing is enough, not even every success, every disciplined act, or every careful connection. The story tells us to accept this pause because it is a holy pain. It makes us humble, reliant, and open to something that we didn't create. The valley is now a blank slate, ready for anything to happen. It has both the hope and the pain of not being finished, which is a necessary emptiness before being fulfilled. At this moment, the limits of form are respected, hope is born, and the question is felt in every silent heart. Who or what will send the breath? When the valley is quiet, a new call comes, prophecy to the breath, the ruach, or wind or breath, or divine spark that makes the difference between just existing and living a full, meaningful life must enter where form without spirit stands still. Ezekiel's vision now changes from structure to spirit and from assembly to animation. He speaks and even the corners of the earth respond. The wind rushes in, crossing borders that neither man nor bone can cross. The breath does not come from the valley itself. It comes from outside, from all sides, and it won't be limited by geography, lineage, or history. This is the breath that was over the waters at the beginning of time, the essence that holds both galaxies and prayers. In the Bible, ruach is not just air, it is also presence. It is not just wind, it is the mind and spirit of God moving through everything. The vision becomes full of hope as Ezekiel calls out. The divine breath is not a reward for hard work. It is a gift or a visit. The science of inspiration becomes sacred here. To be truly alive is to be breathed into. Our lungs fill with air, our brains wake up with new energy, and our spirits wake up to new possibilities. Ruach marks the point at which potential becomes real, right on the edge of the uncanny valley. Inspiration is more than just a metaphor for the brain. Breath stabilizes us, soothes the body, and redirects the nervous pathways from fear to openness. The rush of oxygen after holding your breath, the deep sigh after feeling anxious, and the rush of clarity when your mind wakes up, all look like the holy scene that Ezekiel sees. The body, like the bones, rises to the call of life itself. The wind's arrival is a huge change for the spirit. No matter how well we put ourselves back together, or how well we rebuild community or memory, something important is missing without the gift of ruach. We can do our best to get ready, but presence divine, indescribable, and life-changing comes from somewhere else to make us fully alive. It reminds us that life is more than just planning, strategy, and strength. At its core, life is a partnership with presence, a miracle that happens when the breath finally comes from all four corners. The exiles, including Ezekiel, are surprised and satisfied by this intervention. After loss, after feeling numb, after routines of effort and assembly, the arrival of the breath changes everything. The valley is now restless, but not because of chaos. It's ready. The spirit moves through, connecting and speeding up, calling each person to rise up whole and holy. The lesson lasts a lifetime. Respect the wind. Wanda ruach. Revelation, restoration, and renewal do not originate from oneself. They emanate from the source that is perpetually greater, consistently approaching us when all else is ready. In Ezekiel's vision, restoration happens in a planned order. Each step follows a healing law, and each movement sets the stage for the next. There is a reason for the order. Bones come together first, then sinews, then flesh, and finally breath. There is no hurry. Nothing can be skipped. This structure is not only a story, but also a pattern, a model for change in every time period. Before they can support sinews, the bones must come together. Before strength and protection can come, the structure must be finished. Before breath can fill the body with life, it must be healed. This order respects the fact that recovery is both fragile and strong. It recognizes that wholeness is layered, iterative, and dependent on how well the patient is doing. Ezekiel's valley shows that every step forward in restoration could break if the last step isn't honored. The order is important spiritually because it shows how faith and life rebuild after a break. People who go back to hope too soon, skipping the stages of grief or connection, can sometimes feel lost. The valley says to take your time and make progress slowly. First, name the loss, then put the pieces back together, then learn how to be part of a community again, and finally, look for inspiration. Every story of exile and return has taught us the art of restoration. The sequence corresponds to neural recovery on a psychological level. The mind that is anxious wants quick fixes, but real healing takes time and care. First, you need to find and accept the parts of yourself that have been broken by trauma or loss. Next, connections and relationships need to be strengthened again, and support needs to be brought back. The spirit can only rise and the future can only come back when the self is whole and the network is restored. Ezekiel's vision goes against the modern desire to take the easy way out. The process is holy, a slow dance that requires trust and discipline. Every step gets you ready for the next one, and every movement is based on what came before it. Hurrying or skipping makes restoration a fragile success, an appearance without substance, survival without meaning. The risk of skipping steps is that you will hurt yourself again. Healing that skips over pain or connection that is needed is not complete. Restoration is not a quick fix. It is a layered practice that requires patience and focus. The valley in its own way allows time, progress, the slow letting go of old patterns, and the acceptance of new ones. Ezekiel's valley is now a map for anyone looking for wholeness, not just for people who lived a long time ago. It tells people to respect the process, trust the structure, be humble about their limits, and expect to breathe. The order of events is important on every journey, whether it's personal, communal, or spiritual. Patience brings dignity and safety, and following the laws of restoration brings hope. The gathering is the best time for restoration to happen. This is when individual bones come together to form a body, and the restored body becomes a single force. Ezekiel's valley is not rebuilt as a group of people who are alone, but as a huge army that is united in purpose and strength. The vision is clear. Healing is not just for individuals. It is also for groups. Coming back to life after death is finished in togetherness. The process starts with each bone finding its place. But soon, the focus changes. Sinews hold together not just one thing, but many. Flesh doesn't just cover one frame. It covers many. The valley, which used to be broken up, is now a place of unity. People who were alone are now part of a living, breathing whole. Restoration understood as a group is powerful. Healing individuals is important, but the valley won't be fully transformed until the group has a shared identity. The body that has come back to life doesn't just sit there or stay the same. It stands, organizes, and moves forward. Ezekiel watches as the army comes back together and gets ready not just to live, but to do something bigger. The psychological impact is very strong. Trauma breaks lives, builds walls, and makes people turn inward. The valley shows that the goal of healing is to rejoin the community and restore a shared destiny. The newly revived are not left to wander alone. They take their place as interdependent members of a greater vision. In today's world, spiritual and emotional renewal is best achieved through collective effort, belonging, and reciprocal support. Restoration of the community is not the same as personal recovery. Personal healing requires self-reflection, humility, and patience, while communal healing requires forgiveness, cooperation, and a new perspective. The valley teaches that to thrive, we must work and move together to become a greater army of hope than we are on our own. The army's standing is both real and symbolic. It brings people together and turns old wounds into shared strength. Ezekiel's army does not show power. Instead, it shows how to come together after loss. It is not a weapon against others, but a symbol of renewed purpose and the willingness to live beyond mere survival. The reanimated stand not only as proof of the miracle, but also as people who are part of the divine mission. The Valley of Dry Bones is now a place to start doing things, to work together for the future, and to have faith as a movement. There are many modern uses. There are real personal valleys and spiritual wildernesses, but there are also community deserts, places where hope is needed and healing must be done together. Cultures, faith communities, families, and nations must learn to heal not only within themselves, but also with each other. The voice in the valley calls for unity, shared identity, and courage found together. The vision gets stronger as the section comes to an end. Once the valley echoed with lonely loss. Now it hums with business plans. The bodies stand because they are together, and they move because they are together. In the end, restoration is a miracle for everyone, a huge army that is ready, inspired, and called to a new purpose. No restoration is free of pushback. Even though life is coming back to the valley, not everyone welcomes the new with open arms. Ezekiel's vision quietly recognizes the small, stubborn comfort that comes from being in a familiar state of despair. The bones ready for life may pull away from it. The weight of possibilities can be heavier than the numbness of the past. There are many ways to resist. Some people are afraid of taking on responsibility, afraid of being let down if new life doesn't last. For some, it's the inertia of long habit. Being in exile became a part of who they were. Going back to fullness, movement, and hope seems risky. The valley is full of echoes of past failures, which makes people even more careful when they are invited to rise. This resistance is real in the brain. The mind prefers the safety of familiar patterns, even if they cause pain. Cortisol, which has been in charge for a long time, becomes a baseline. Any change, even good change, is seen as a possible threat. Familiar despair is predictable, and the brain, which is smart but careful, holds on to what it knows. To come back to life, you need more than just breath. You need the courage to face the unknown. Ezekiel's prophecy acknowledges this tension. Not everyone wants to be restored. It is offered. The voice that calls and the wind that breathes don't take away freedom. The newly restored are told to stand, but they have to choose to move and take part. The price of hope is real. It asks exiles to give up their old ways of complaining, to risk wanting again, and to find meaning in following the rules instead of giving up. Resistance is a sign of a deeper struggle. Will we accept the new weight of life? To rise means to leave behind the words and rituals of loss and use a new language of hope and thanks. The valley warns of spiritual drift. It is possible to have life and still choose, in a subtle way, to go back to the comfort of being dead. The community must also deal with this resistance. When a whole group of people is in a state of chronic despair, it can be upsetting when a few of them try to come back to life. Old friendships may break down, but patterns of codependence and shared sadness are hard to break. In the army that forms, being together in hope can sometimes feel scarier than being alone in grief, but the vision stays the same. Bravery spreads. The prophecy's gift is not just bringing things back to life, it also slowly melts away inertia. Every act of obedience, every step, every breath, and every embrace of possibility weakens resistance. People who are newly alive find strength in being part of a community and weakness in being alone. The valley, which used to be a place of despair, is now a place where brave people can start moving forward. Ezekiel's valley doesn't promise that there won't be any resistance. Instead, it promises that it will change gently. Life, when it comes, is persistent and persuasive, strong enough to get even the most cautious people to stand up. Restoration is always an option, not something you have to do. It's a miracle that dry bones can come back to life. But it's also a miracle that people who used to love being alone can learn to choose to be with others. Prophetic restoration isn't just about being inspired. It's about being obedient and doing the same thing every day, even if you don't see any changes. Ezekiel's job is to speak the truth and keep saying life in the valley, even though he sees death all around him. The miracle does not happen in one word. It happens in the rhythm of unyielding obedience. Prophecy spoken, hope kept, word after word building a bridge out of despair. In this case, obedience is not passive or blind. It is a conscious choice to align with possibility, to refuse to give up and instead keep insisting that change is possible. Ezekiel doesn't get his reward right away for being faithful. The valley is often quiet, but repetition itself is what makes change possible. Each prophetic act is like striking flint, making sparks until fire finally comes. This spiritual practice is based on neuroscience. Through repetition, the brain makes new connections. Every time someone acts on their faith or says something hopeful, new circuits form. This is more than just thinking positively. It's the slow, hard work of changing what you expect. Like the soul, the mind gets stronger through patient endurance. Obedience builds muscle memory, and spiritual readiness grows when practice is respected. In the valley, obedience means not letting emptiness have the last word. It is the attitude of coming back and taking part, even if there is no result. Some days, it seems like restoration is just around the corner. Other days, nothing has changed. But by sticking to the practice, possibility gets stronger. When the last call comes, when the breath comes, it finds readiness, a space ready for life. Ezekiel's model goes against how impatient we are now. Transformation does not occur as an instantaneous download. Rather, it unfolds gradually, serving as a reward for persistent dedication to the work. Prophetic obedience builds spiritual muscle memory, which is the basis for lasting hope. The ultimate gift of obedience is not merely fruit, but fidelity. The prophet and everyone else who follows the path learn that their worth comes from what they do, not what happens. The commission is the same in every valley. Speak the word, keep working, and have faith in the process. Awakening often happens on the 10th try or the 100th time. When restoration is done, the valley is not the same as it was. What used to be a field of dead bones is now a huge army. This is a change from doing nothing to doing something, from just surviving to living with a purpose. At its peak, Ezekiel's vision goes beyond healing as getting back what was lost. It becomes the revelation of a new identity, forged in struggle and sealed by a divine commission. This huge army is more than just the sum of its parts that have come back to life. The restored do not merely revert to a previous condition. They enter a future characterized by initiative, accountability, and autonomy. In the Bible, armies are not just tools for conquering. They are also symbols of discipline, unity, and strength in numbers. Once brittle and scattered, individual bones are now joined together and filled with flesh and spirit. They can stand, move, and respond. There is a big difference between being passive and being active. Survival is reactive. It means holding on and getting through hard times. But the army takes the initiative. It organizes, plans, protects, and builds. The change is like the last step in healing, when people who have been hurt become not just survivors, but also participants and leaders in the ongoing story of life. They bring compassion that comes from pain, wisdom that comes from failure, and courage that comes from having felt despair. Spiritually, the empowered identity of the army illustrates the divine pattern manifested in human experience. The army is not Ezekiel's or even Israel's. It is God's. He called it, gave it weapons, and set it apart for a holy purpose. The restoration that began deep in the valley is complete when the people are ready to act. Their passivity is gone, and their future is now based on obedience and partnership. The exceedingly great army of Ezekiel is proof. The path from the dry bones of despair to the readiness of new purpose is not straight, and it is never fully finished. Restoration, which was so hard to get, must be kept. Not only do the newly revived need to remember their journey, but they also need to renew their mission every day by speaking, acting, uniting, and serving. This army isn't still. It moves forward and changes to meet new challenges as they come up. This vision is both a call to action and a promise for any community that has been through trauma or loss. We are not restored solely for our own solace. Fulfillment is attained through mission. Animation by itself is not enough. The Spirit gives you the strength to act, for justice, for compassion, and for creation. Ezekiel's army is a sign of every group, family, or person who, through grace, comes back to life and works to make a future that is better than their broken past. This last movement is not about victory. It's about gratitude mixed with responsibility. The army remembers its valley where it was dry and heard the promise. Its weapon is hope, and its strength is humility. The real miracle is not just coming back to life, but living with purpose, as one called and given life by the same breath that lifted the bones. The vision ultimately serves as both a testament to divine power and an invitation to abandon the passivity of despair, to unite, to act with purpose, and to live as individuals inspired by vision and destined for more than mere survival. The valley and everyone who lives there have changed. Hope comes back with the promise, "I will open your graves." The valley that saw despair and resurrection is now the site of an even greater miracle, the promise that what has been closed, buried or shut away will not stay that way forever. Ezekiel's vision touches the deepest fears and the most serious self-imposed limits, and gives them the assurance that they will also give way to the presence of new life. Graves are more than just places to rest. They are signs of every closed-off future and every internal belief that says, "This cannot change." Despair lives in these places, teaching resignation as wisdom and convincing the heart to accept limits as fate. In the story, opening graves is an external action that goes against even the strongest internal beliefs. What we thought was unchangeable, final, static, locked, becomes temporary when we see God's promise. The promise is both universal and personal. The word is directed at the whole group, the nation of Israel, the exiles, and the community that was once desolate, but it also reaches each person. No matter how deep the burial or how heavy the seal, only someone who wants to restore things can open graves. Hope is more than just thinking positively. It is also trusting that help will come from outside of what people can do. The opening of graves signifies the complete reversal of despair on a spiritual level. It is not just coming back from exile. It is resurrection, a renewal so complete that it changes how we see what is possible. You can open doors to pain and memory, grief and mistakes, shame and regret. The God who speaks in the valley is behind this movement, and not just once in a while, but all the time as part of the process of restoration. This promise is freedom in the mind. It tells the listener to question their own limiting beliefs and to figure out where in their mind or life a grave has become law. It breaks down mental resignation and gives us hope that renewal is not only possible, but also promised. To be ready for open graves means to be open to surprises and to expect the unexpected, even when everything seems to be locked up. People in the community can heal here too. The promise is not just for one person, but for everyone. As the graves open, the dead are reunited, the forgotten are remembered, and the tired are called back to action. Hope becomes shared, unrestricted, and communal. The section ends with a new thought. What was buried will rise, what was lost will be found, and what was said to be over will start again. Ezekiel's vision and the inspiration it still gives makes this point. Despair may have graves, but hope always has an open door. Return the word reverberates from ancient Israel, transcending the centuries, resonating within every soul that has experienced exile. In Ezekiel's vision, return is not only a physical journey, but also a deep psychological one. It means going back to the land and the mind, coming home after long nights of despair and numbness. For the exiles, home has always meant more than land. It is a place of safety, memory, and identity, where the pieces of the self come together and rest. The promise, "You shall dwell in your own land," speaks to more than just land. It speaks to the deepest desire of the heart. It is a promise of restoration where there was once unrest. Neurologically, re-inhabitation signifies safety following trauma. The parasympathetic state is the one that wins when the nervous system goes from fight or flight to rest and digest. The body relaxes, the mind calms down, and alertness turns into creative rest. This is a necessary part of spiritual restoration. The great army of the valley, which has come back to life, is not just called to march. It is called to live there and feel the peace, safety, and belonging that the heart needs. The metaphor is very broad. Going back to Israel is like going back to a centered, integrated mind, where the soul's wandering ends and a new stability begins. The story talks about how hard it is to adjust to a world that isn't defined by fear anymore after a long time away. Sometimes the hardest part of the journey home is deciding whether or not to let ourselves live without always being on guard and accepting the strange ease of safety. For a lot of people, the habit of despair stays with them even after they don't need it anymore. The mind, shaped by trauma, may react negatively to peace. Spiritual practice now entails the delicate endeavor of re-engaging with life to assert the promised security, to cultivate trust, and to reside rather than merely endure. God says, "I am with you," and promises not only to return, but also to stay with you. The community must also adapt to the rhythms of re-inhabitation. People who have been restored become neighbors, friends, and family, learning to live together in ways that show they care for each other and remember things together. The process isn't always easy. It takes time for new boundaries and old stories to come together. But the land itself where you live makes you want to be patient. The bones that used to be dry need to dig into the soil of belonging. Ezekiel's vision doesn't end with the resurrection or the army's march. It ends with life slowly starting up again. The story's last gift is lasting, the promise that I will plant you, and you shall not be plucked up again. This promise makes the future not a threat, but a field of new possibilities. As the section ends, the listener is drawn into the invitation to come back to themselves, live your own life again, let go of what you needed in exile, and let rest and peace find their right place inside you. The valley, which used to be empty and scary, is now the start of a journey back to the heart's own home, as well as back to land. Unity is the promise that lasts after things have been fixed, and it is the gift that comes from putting things back together that were once apart. Ezekiel's vision shows two sticks, one for Judah and one for Joseph, being held together in the prophet's hand and seen as one by everyone. This is more than just bringing tribes back together. It is the healing of internal fracture, the integration of the self formerly torn in two by exile, rupture, or despair. The heart that is split is well known. When we hurt, we break apart. When we lose something, parts of us fight each other. The self longs for reconciliation, for unity, for meaning, for tranquility. The two sticks stand for these breaks, the old wounds that keep us apart inside, and the different urges and identities that exile creates. The promise, I will make them one, echoes in the mind, calling for a return to wholeness not just in body or land, but also in spirit. The process of coming together is soft and exact. Neither stick loses its shape or history. Integration respects what each part has been through. The psychological journey of wholeness, akin to the prophetic act, does not eliminate struggle but integrates it in harmony. The valley teaches that healing is not about forgetting pain, but about making peace with what is still there. It is acceptance that everything that is broken can still belong. The ultimate return is spiritual unity. The heart that is divided comes home, and the tribes that are restless stop fighting. The prophecy applies to everyone who wants to bring together their thoughts and feelings, their faith and their struggles, their intentions and their wounds. The unity that Ezekiel predicts is not a cheap agreement, but a costly synthesis. It is the coming together of opposites with love and respect, the end of being alone. This unity is also learned by the community. The tribes need to forgive, remember, and let their histories mix. Integration is a sign of God's will, a sign that the full circle of restoration includes everyone coming together. The prophet's hands bring the two sticks together, and the nation feels the softness of belonging after being apart for hundreds of years. This unity is holy and will last. Once the self has reached this point, it can move through life without feeling tense all the time. The sticks that are joined together are strong and will last forever. All parts are welcome neurologically, and all breaks are healed spiritually in the embrace of purpose. As the section comes to an end, the listener is asked to think about how they would fit in. What two sticks are they holding? Which groups within ask for peace? Ezekiel's vision is timeless. Everyone who accepts the divine touch can go from being alone to being one. The last gift of restoration is peace. It is the result and lasting mark of every valley crossed, every bone revived, and every heart brought back together. Ezekiel's vision shows the promise as a covenant, which is an unbreakable promise between the Creator and creation, between the divine breath and the army that has just been brought back to life. It is a peace that goes beyond the absence of conflict and the temporary calmness. It is a lasting state, a complete and lasting integration of body, mind, and soul. God's promise in the everlasting covenant is, I will be their God, and they will be my people. It puts an end to all unrest and fear, the anxiety of being away from home, the pain of being apart, and the sadness of memories. All of these things come together to make a new reality. In this world, there is no more fighting inside. The fragmented self, the afflicted community, and the unsettled spirit ultimately discover the gentle terrain of shalom. In terms of the brain, peace is also a final integration. The nervous system, no longer held captive by vigilance, releases its grip. The heart rate stabilizes, respiration deepens, and cognition clarifies. The old prayer for peace was always a call for wholeness, synapses lining up, old patterns breaking down, and new harmonies coming to life inside and between people. The body finds its home in the healing rhythm of sleep. Living in a covenant of peace means living with confidence. Without maintenance, no restoration is complete. Peace must be received as a gift and practiced as a discipline every day. The vision encourages gentle rituals like meditation, gratitude, forgiveness, and faith. These are all things that are good for your brain, your emotional health, and your community. In spiritual terms, peace needs to be taken care of. The covenant of peace is based on God's presence. Ultimately, it is neither a location nor an accomplishment, but a connection. The promised sanctuary, I will set my sanctuary among them forever, is the reality of belonging both inside and outside. To live in peace is to be filled with the divine, safe from harm, and supported by hope. This is where the journey through the valley ends. Restoration is not a never-ending task, but a journey to health. The covenant of peace is a ribbon that ends all fighting and a blessing for everyone who has dared to believe, rebuild, and come back. The promise is simple and deep. You are never alone, you are always welcome, and you are finally whole. Ezekiel's vision of restoration goes beyond survival, unity, or even peace. It includes the promise of guidance and gentle authority, which is represented by the Davidic shepherd. The prophecy ends the story of the valley with hope based on both memory and expectation. A shepherd king who brings people together, keeps them safe, and leads them with wisdom gained from suffering. Choosing David as a symbol was not an accident. David, a poet and king, is the perfect example of a compassionate leader because he knows what it's like to be exiled and to come home, to be vulnerable and to win. For Ezekiel's exiles, the image is a sign that leaders won't be harsh or distant. People who know how to take care of things and have experienced loss will be in charge of restoration. The idea of shepherding is found throughout the Bible, and it is similar to the neurological metaphor of gentle care. Here, leadership is not about being in charge. It's about guiding others. It's about slowly and patiently caring for broken spirits and minds that aren't sure what to do. The Davidic shepherd knows when to move forward, when to stop, and when to rest. This care is very important for both people and communities after a traumatic event. The newly restored need soft limits, careful instruction, and kind correction. They learn to trust again, to follow, and to feel safe. The shepherd's presence is the answer to wandering in a spiritual way. It is the voice that guides, the presence that protects, and the invitation to come back every time you feel like you're going off track. Ezekiel's valley shows that relationships are necessary for restoration. A leader who calls each person by name, gives them meaning, order, and lasting protection is one way to do this. Neurologically, it is clear that gentle leadership is important. A mind that has been under constant threat needs time and safety to learn new ways of thinking. Too much stress can break fragile trust, but wise guidance lets people adapt slowly. The Davidic shepherd is the model for all leaders who want to heal instead of just organize. This leadership is what brings the community together. A guiding voice is needed for a united people, someone who puts health above all else and can tell a story that includes memory and the future, pain and promise. The shepherd doesn't get rid of differences. Instead, he brings them together, like a composer making unity out of diversity. Here is where the valley's progress comes to an end. Restoration that lasts, not through force, but through wise, gentle care. For the audience, the message is clear. Look for and value shepherds who heal, listen, and use their power to guide rather than control. These people, whether they are spiritual, communal, or family members, become the stable ground for the restored. They spread hope, teach the right ways to do things, and keep the rules that keep restoration going. As the story comes to an end, the Davidic shepherd is a sign of hope and blessing. The Valley of Dry Bones is now a field of possibilities, and the path ahead is safe. Leaders who are wise, caring, and strong in a gentle way will continue and expand the restoration. The end of Ezekiel's story invites us to look for, and if we can, become the shepherd who brings every exile home. The ultimate outcome of restoration is knowledge, not just facts, but also personal experience, deep conviction, and quiet awe. The refrain, "Then you will know that I am the Lord," from Ezekiel's vision, sums up and brings together all the bones that have been restored, all the breaths that have been taken, and all the promises that have been kept. This knowledge goes beyond what we can understand. It is not the result of memorization or intellectual mastery, but rather the convergence of the divine and human heart. Neurologically, true knowledge resides not only in the cortex, but throughout the body, manifesting in moments of tranquility, gratitude, and reverence. The nervous system calms down, the spirit and self come together, and the feeling of God's presence becomes real. Knowing God is a lifelong journey that happens in the rhythm of restoration. Ezekiel's Valley says that knowledge isn't just for prophets or visionaries. Every exile who walks from desolation into breath, every soul who takes the chance to come back and rebuild, carries the seeds of knowing. Faith's journey is always from the unknown to the known, from wanting to be with someone to being with someone. The section asks us to think about how restoration changed the heart's awareness. Where do old fears go when they meet quiet trust? To know God is to follow the path from nothingness to fullness and hear the promise of God in every dark place. The I am is not an idea. It is being there when you are in pain, being with you when you are alone, and breathing in the valley. As breath flows and life begins again, knowing becomes the new reality. The restored don't stay at the door. They go deeper and learn the rhythms of relationship moment by moment and day by day. The mind gets stronger and the heart opens up. In this light, everything that once seemed lost becomes proof of God's pursuit, mercy, and faithful friendship. Ezekiel's last gift is more than just an end. It is an invitation that will last forever. The valley will always have its bones, its quiet spots, and its chances to be sad. But under every grave, above every exile, and next to every wanderer, the knowing stands as a promise. I am the Lord. At the end of the Valley of Dry Bones, Ezekiel's vision reveals its last and deepest promise. My sanctuary will be among them forever. The journey, which has been full of emptiness and exile, ends not in distant hope or external blessing, but in closeness in the divine presence that lives within. Sanctuary is more than just a holy place. It is a sacred presence that is present in all of life's normal days and places. For exiles, sanctuary is the assurance that home is not lost, and that even in the aftermath of loss, the spirit can dwell secure. This is not just the promise of ancient Israel. It is an invitation to everyone who longs for wholeness, for those whose lives have gone through dry and quiet valleys. Spiritually, the sanctuary in the midst is intimacy. God's presence is not an abstract idea, nor is it locked away in a faraway temple. It becomes personal and lives among and within the group. The heart's deepest pain is to be with someone, to be understood, and to be supported. This is where it finds its answer. The holy is no longer far away. It is close next to and inside. Neurologically, this abiding presence brings rest and safety. The long circuits of vigilance in the brain relax, and the peace of being with others steadies thought and emotional rhythm. The sanctuary is a place of peace and readiness. where one feels that no matter what valleys come in the future, they are anchored by an unmovable presence. Community is also changing. When there is sanctuary, enemies become friends, scared people become kind, and everyone learns the patience that allows restoration to last. Sanctuary means that no one is really alone. Every exile's return is celebrated, and every wound is given time and space to heal. The group learns the song of resilience, which is made easier by the fact that the sacred is always at the center of their lives. The last gift is peace, which is not just a lack of stress, but an active harmony with God, yourself, and others. Ezekiel's vision ends with comfort and strength. I will be with you. My sanctuary will not depart. The listener is blessed and invited to see sanctuary not as a place to go, but as the constant presence that has guided every step through the valley. This is the blessing at the end and beginning of the journey. A quiet confidence, a safe place for every broken heart, and a home that will always be there. The last part of Ezekiel's vision has effects that go far beyond Israel's borders. It can be seen by all the nations watching, as well as by anyone who wants to see restoration and wonders what power brings it about. It is not just the exiles who change when God is with the restored. The world is asked to look, understand, and be amazed. The story gets bigger after the valley is quiet and shakes, and after it is restored, united and peaceful. The community that has come back to life is not meant to live just for itself. Its healing is a testament, a living proof that despair is not final and that new life arises from divine purpose. The covenant of peace and the sanctuary in the middle become signs for all the people far away. The Lord dwells there. The restoration of hope is proven by visible change, by the proof of lives made whole. The experiences of individuals throughout history are intended to motivate the collective. Other countries are not drawn to Israel's rebirth from dry bones by fear or conquest, but by awe and curiosity. What power could turn such loss into something good? What presence stays strong through exile and return? The answer is more than just theology. It's something that people do see and talk about. God's promise and purpose are both the nation's recognition. Restoration is never limited to one place. People who are brought back to life in hope shine from the outside. People who have been through hard times become beacons of faith, endurance, and healing that point to something greater than themselves. When communities are whole, they invite others out of despair, not because they are better than others, but because they are grateful and share humanity. The story makes sure that this witness is humble and open. Israel's journey is not one of victory over others, but one of kindness toward them. The vision's gift is not tribal pride, but a generous invitation. Come, see what love has done. The presence of the divine among people is the best proof, breaking down old barriers and bringing peace to everyone. Ezekiel's valley does not end with walls, but with welcome. The last blessing goes beyond old borders and cultural boundaries. The world now has the knowledge of God, which was hard-won through exile and sorrow. Every valley crossed, every bone healed, and every breath taken becomes a seed of hope for the nations that are watching. May everyone who sees the restoration see not only its power, but also its kindness. Every life that is healed should become a messenger, and every community that is restored should become a place of peace. And may the sanctuary promised forever reach every part of the world so that everyone can know the God who brings life from dry bones, hope from despair, and unity from what was once scattered. This is the blessing, an invitation for people of all ages and from all nations to see, wonder, and be drawn to peace. Peace. The word that hangs over the end of exile, that hums under every promise, that makes the Valley of Dry Bones not just a story of revival, but also a revelation of wholeness. In Ezekiel's vision, shalom is not the silence that follows a fight, or the lack of noise. It is the fullness of life, harmony, integrity, growth, and peace. The ultimate condition of shalom is all-encompassing. It includes physical safety and community healing, spiritual unity, and the ability to be creative. People are grounded because they know they are part of something that will last. Trust is what holds communities together, and hope is what holds their memories together. The land itself is involved. The fields give, the air is sweet, and the rhythms of day and night bring food instead of danger. In Shalom, the world is a complicated balance where everyone is welcome and every voice is heard. This is the place that every act of restoration whispers to you. Shalom is the peace that comes after the work of healing and the happiness that comes after the risk of hope. The bones are no longer dry. They are gathered, fleshed out, and animated. Breath fills every corner, inspiring song and movement. The valley's past is not ignored. Instead, it is changed. The memory of sadness makes the happiness now deeper. Loss, when experienced through restoration, becomes the basis of wisdom. Shalom means living in the presence of God without fear. God's sanctuary is real and close by, and people live there as well as worship there. There is no threat at the border, and no voice makes people suspicious or angry. Every heart lets go of its grip, giving up vigilance for joy and anticipation for rest. Forgiveness is a way of life, joy is something we share, and gratitude is what we eat every day. Shalom is integration in the mind. Old triggers don't bother you anymore. Your nervous system is in balance, your thoughts and feelings are in sync, and your creativity comes out. The mind, free from memories of being constantly on guard, can explore, create, and trust. The long march from trauma is over. Instead of looking for threats, people are now focusing on doing good. In the group, Shalom is vision that has come to life. Leadership is about caring for others, not controlling them. Differences lead to agreement, and every neighbor becomes family. The lines that used to separate people have faded into a place where everyone belongs. The covenant of peace isn't just an idea, it's something we feel every day. Stability that lets us grow. Love that gives us courage, and safety that inspires us. At the end, the story comes full circle. The valley that once stood for everything lost now stands for everything found. Shalom is not an end. It is a way of life that must be protected, practiced, and grown. The restored people, the revived land, and the holy sanctuary are three blessings that invite everyone to come, stay, and live. And so the vision closes. May everyone who hears the story find Shalom, which is deep, unshakable, and everlasting. May every trip through the valley end with full belonging, endless peace, and the holy joy of being home. The journey through Ezekiel's valley makes everyone think deeply about where their dry bones are. What part of your story or yourself is lost and buried under the dust of failure, disappointment, or exhaustion? Finding your valley is the first step to renewal. It's the honest look that doesn't let you escape and starts the healing process. There are many ways to have dry bones. For some, they are dreams that were never realized. For others, relationships that were never repaired, regrets that were never mourned, or gifts that were never used. You may be able to see shame, anger, and anxiety in your inner world. Trauma, addiction, lost innocence, or eroded faith. All are dry. All are aching for breath. This part gives each person a chance to look at their own field of loss without being judged. Start by noticing what doesn't change, even though you try. Where do you feel stuck, numb, and hopeless? What are the stories you don't tell anymore, the prayers you don't say anymore, and the passions you've let die down? It takes courage to name your dry bones. It does not ask for punishment. The first miracle in the valley is not life, but honesty, the willingness to face despair on its own terms. Wounds grow in the dark. They get smaller when you know yourself. The neurologic and spiritual sciences agree. Loss that isn't acknowledged gets heavier, and pain that isn't faced becomes a hidden cause of sadness. Finding your valley is a powerful act in and of itself. It breaks the silence of shame and shows that you believe in your ability to start over. What is missing in your spiritual inventory? What hurts? What have I put away? If you can't see your dry bones, listen for fears that keep coming back, or disappointments that keep happening. Pay attention to the patterns that repeat themselves without you realizing it. The voices in your head that say, "It can't change," and the cycles that seem to be immune to effort. The valley's dust settles thickest over parts of the self that were once alive and now sleep. Let yourself mourn what you've lost. Let your compassion reach out to every dream that has been lost and every hope that has faded with time. Invite safe people to this job. Restoration is rarely a solitary pursuit. Trusted friends, therapists, mentors, and loved ones are often the first to see your bones, even when you struggle to name them. Their job is not to fix or explain, but to be there. Sharing the truth, even in silence, can give people hope. There are times when the valley is shed dry bones in a family, community, or culture. Rituals and relationships can wither. Generations may bear the anguish of exile, unarticulated and unacknowledged. It's important to know these bigger valleys. The work is the same, slowly and without judgment, noticing, remembering together, and being ready to call the bones by name. The last step is invitation. What does it mean to be open to the idea of life coming back? Identification is not the end of the story. It is the start. The same God who met Ezekiel in the dust is with you, ready to bring forth sinews, flesh, and breath. The bones themselves are not what beat you. Their presence shows that you are still alive, strong, and refuse to go away. Seeing is the first step on the road to restoration. The valley of dry bones, whether they are your own or someone else's, old or new, is not a grave, but a doorway. You are ready to see the miracle of return when you know what your dry bones are. Say their names. Look at what was lost. The breath will come after. Prophecy is not limited to ancient visions or spectacular miracles. Ezekiel's valley gives us a model for prophetic practice that is alive and well in the present. It is needed wherever dry bones are. The prophetic voice does not reside exclusively within ink and parchment. It ascends in every heart that ventures to infuse life into death, hope into despair, and renewal into the most forsaken realms. Today, prophetic practice starts with being fully present. It is first the work of noticing, seeing valleys where others see wasteland, naming pain when silence tempts retreat. To be prophetic means to honor the truth and face pain with grace instead of avoiding it or denying it. The prophet's job is not to run away, but to meet people where they are, standing among the bones and not rushing past them. The next step is to speak up. Prophets say things that don't seem logical or safe. They don't give in to cynicism or despair. Instead, they speak of possibility when logic fails and the promise of breath when the valley is still asleep. Not empty hope, but disciplined hope, being willing to be foolish for the sake of new life and speaking up when others are tired. True prophecy is based on truth and supported by love. Today, prophetic practice means learning how to be patient and obey. Results may not be immediate. Restoration does not occur in valleys with every utterance. The prophet keeps going, staying faithful even when things don't change quickly. Every day I practice this. I devote myself to the process, to showing up again and again, and to believing that what seems unchangeable can receive life. Modern prophets are not lone heroes. They are friends to those who are hurting. Their best gift is being there for you, listening, caring, not leaving you or judging you. The valley is not as lonely when other people are there. Restoration is possible because of the act of solidarity and the shared and nurtured faith. Today's prophecy is about relationships and communities. It brings people back together, invites them in, and heals them. Prophetic practice draws on tradition while dealing with new situations in a spiritual way. It honors the stories of exile and return, using old wisdom to heal modern wounds. The practice is creative because it changes old patterns, comes up with new rituals, and doesn't let the story of despair have the last word. Prophets teach people in their communities to see dry bones around them, to not give up, and to look forward to things. The discipline is good for your mental health. The prophetic voice breaks negative cycles. It encourages neuroplastic change, changes the chemistry of despair, and changes the way we think about things from doom to possibility. The results are small and build over time. Restoration happens through small acts, quiet presence, and repeated encouragement. In a practical sense, anyone who won't let valleys become graves is a prophet today. Parents, teachers, healers, artists, leaders, neighbors, and others can all be voices of life. The practice is open, and the invitation is there. Ezekiel's valley is still there, and so is the chance to practice prophecy. The call is the same in every age and in every heart. Name the bones, speak life, wait for the breath, and believe in return. The valley doesn't close. It waits for people to stand, speak, endure, and see restoration happen over and over again. The spirit, or ruach, moves not only through the big events of history and prophecy, but also through the small daily cycles that happen all the time. In Ezekiel's vision, the breath comes in a burst of renewal. But in our lives, ruach is carried by the rhythms that shape our hours, moods, and hopes, the circadian dance between light and dark, sleep and waking, stillness and activity. Circadian rhythms are the biological clockwork that controls how our bodies and minds work. Every cell, organ, and thought is subtly tuned to this cycle. This is a legacy written in our DNA and a wisdom that goes back further than exile or prophecy. Morning brings alertness and readiness, and cortisols rise. Evening, on the other hand, slowly invites melatonin to rest and restore. These are chemical changes on the surface, but underneath them is a dance of spirit, a pulsing call to wholeness. In the past, people got up and went to bed with the sun, and their daily lives were in line with the way things were made. Today, technology makes the day longer and the night shorter. But the old wisdom tells us to come back. Healthy rhythms heal and chaos drains. To honor the spirit within our design, we must take part in the cycle by breathing deeply at dawn and turning inward at dusk. Ruach works with biology to inspire discipline and bring about peace. In the end, Ezekiel's valley is a story of renewal. The bones that are spread out come together to make a body, and the still forms get breath. This process is like the body's natural cycle of going from empty to full every morning and from busy to quiet every night. Restoration isn't just one thing. It's a rhythm, a patient coming back, and a daily flow of life into the most worn-out places. Circadian rhythms are holy in a spiritual sense. The dawn is a metaphor. His mercies are new every morning. Every morning is a resurrection, a call to rise from the valley and find purpose. Every night is a time to give up, trust again, and let go. It's a chance to be filled up or dream again. Ruach fills the lungs when we wake up, wakes up our imaginations when we sleep, and fills every moment in between with new possibilities. To live in harmony with Ruach in our daily lives is to improve our mental and emotional health. Getting up early, saying hello to the day in silence, setting goals and moving the body with thanks, each of these things is a prayer. Letting go of worry, accepting silence, and letting the nervous system reset at night are all blessings. Rituals and rhythms give us hope, help us build strength, and bring us peace. The soul does well when these daily cycles are followed. Creativity deepens, moods stabilize, and resilience grows. The spirit finds its song in the rhythm of everyday life. Neglect, on the other hand, makes you tired, anxious, and disconnected. It's harder to feel Ruach when you're in a hurry and can't sleep. So rest becomes holy work. These patterns also affect how people live together. Families who honor the rhythms of coming together and going apart, workplaces that are balanced, and communities that rest and celebrate together all help to make Ruach stronger. Ezekiel's vision changes from cosmic to personal, happening in waking and sleeping and in the steady grace of each breath. Taking care of your circadian rhythms means getting restoration every day, not just once in a while. Ruach moves in every cycle, whispers hope in every change, and gives energy and comfort to each day. May everyone who wants to start over find it in the dance of light and dark, in the new dawn that comes every day. At first glance, Ezekiel's valley tells a story of personal healing, with each bone being put back together and each life being filled with breath. But as the vision goes on, individual healing turns into group renewal, and the valley becomes a symbol of the power of change in a group. The dry bones don't just come back to life as individuals, they come back as a whole body, a very large army, and their restoration is more than just one person's work. Healing one person at a time is always the first step. The journey of one, the honest naming of loss, the invitation to breathe, and the promise to be whole is like a spark in the valley's darkness. But the story warns you not to stop here. If you try to be whole on your own, you might end up hurting yourself again. But when the restored come together, connect, and shape their shared future, real change happens. Healing goes out. People who have been restored need to learn new ways to trust, serve, forgive, and feel like they belong. Relationships need to be repaired, and old wounds need to be recognized and let go of by everyone. The sinews that connect bones in Ezekiel's vision are pictures of how people depend on each other, how strength comes from working together, and how resilience comes from supporting each other. When restoration fights against being alone, community grows. The Valley's army is not a group of strangers brought back to life. It is a body with a common goal that was formed through shared struggle. They all work together to anchor renewal in identity, plan for action, and make each member feel like they are part of a story that is bigger than their own survival. This change is always hard, but it's always necessary. Community must work to change patterns of distrust, give new roles to people who have lost their way, and let kindness lead the way to growth. To heal a company, you need leaders who are wise, kind, and dedicated to the health of everyone. Visionaries, organizers, healers, and teachers help keep the new structure together, encourage creativity, strengthen memory, and keep hope alive. The Davidic shepherd in Ezekiel's story represents this idea. Leadership that nurtures rather than controls, and that brings people together rather than tearing them apart. The prophecy of the valley is fulfilled by corporate healing on a spiritual level. God's presence is not only in each restored heart, but also in the sanctuary that many people have made together. Rituals, shared prayers, and group thanks all become ways to keep the peace. The community's past is strong, its culture is healing, and its future is bright. The change is very important for the mind. When done together, restoration is even more powerful. People learn by copying others, families do well when they feel safe, and cultures stay alive through memory and hope. The valley used to be quiet and empty, but now it is full of voices that care for each other. Restoration turns into a daily habit, a discipline, and a commitment. The section ends with an invitation to go from healing yourself to healing the community. Help others, tell stories, forgive easily, and look for ways to come together. Ezekiel says that personal renewal is the seed and corporate restoration is the fruit. May every valley of dry bones become not just a place where survivors can find hope, but also a place where new communities can form a body risen in purpose, a place of peace, alive with the breath that makes all things new. Hope is a mystery that is not only poetic or spiritual, it is also a part of the brain itself. Neuroscience now elucidates the mechanisms of hope generation, maintenance, and transmission, elucidating its significance and methods for cultivation. In the Valley of Dry Bones, hope was the unseen force that drove the journey from despair to healing. Its power is both scientific and sacred in every age. Hope is fundamentally a neurochemical phenomenon. When the brain gets signals of possibility, it releases dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter that makes you feel excited, rewarded, and motivated. Ezekiel isn't just prophesying when he speaks life to the bones. He's changing the biochemistry of his people. Research indicates that merely envisioning a favorable future modifies brain activity, thereby fostering motivation and enhancing resilience. Not only does hope change the mood, it also changes the body. It changes how the immune system works, speeds up healing, and controls stress. People who stay hopeful and positive get better faster when they are sick, handle tough times better, and have more neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to change and grow. The science backs up what the vision says. Hope is not foolish. It is a biological and existential need. Trauma impedes hope at the neurological level. Chronic stress and despair inundate the system with cortisol, resulting in hippocampal atrophy and diminished creativity. In Ezekiel's valley, the dry bones are like neural despair, paths worn deep by loss and circuits that only fire in defensive patterns. The first step in the work of restoration is to find these patterns. The next step is to make new experiences of agency, connection, and possibility. You have to work on hope. The brain, like the body, gets stronger when it does the same thing over and over. Prayer, meditation, gratitude, and storytelling are all spiritual practices that are also good for your brain. Every time someone acts on their faith, practices their vision, or expresses their gratitude, synapses fire, new connections form, and hope becomes easier. Communities that promote hope mold brains, not merely hearts. Relationship is very important. The brain is social and hope grows when people connect. Ezekiel shows that hope is contagious when he gathers the bones and breathes with others. Social neuroscience demonstrates that encouragement, empathy, and a shared vision transform group behavior. Healing is a group effort. A shared vision, like a shared breath, gives you strength and keeps you going. Hope does not disregard loss. Resilient brains don't push away sadness or numb pain. They work through it, accept it, and look for ways to grow. The valley is not denied. It is transformed by the spirit of possibility. Psychological research substantiates that meaning-making, the process of deriving purpose from suffering, sustains hope, even amidst significant adversity. Telling stories, doing rituals, and naming both wounds and strengths can change the brain's maps. These insights are often reflected in spiritual traditions. The language of prophecy, prayer, and ritual encourages participants to envision, recollect, and engage, stimulating both neural and spiritual pathways. The promise of restoration is not just a matter of faith. It is a renewal of the mind and body, a reawakening of energy at every level. Ezekiel's vision is both a miracle and a guide. The neuroscience of hope confirms that restoration is achievable. Stress can be changed, despair can be rewired, the future can be imagined, and breathing can be renewed. Every act of hope, every word, every hug, every vision lights up the valley with new possibilities. May every person who hears this find strength not only in their mind, but also in the very circuits of their body. Every valley, every body, and every new morning has its own mystery of hope. There is no straight path to restoration. Even when the breath comes back and the bones are joined, there are times when despair comes back, old habits come back, and progress seems to go backwards. Ezekiel's vision is honest about this. Renewal isn't always smooth sailing. It expects problems. Healing, whether it's personal, communal, or spiritual, needs to have room for disappointment, struggle, and the slow process of starting over. There are many different kinds of setbacks. Some people lose hope when they are tired. External events, loss, rejection, failure can also make people feel anxious, sad, or angry again by sending pulses through their nervous systems. Trust is put to the test again, relationships fall apart, and inner voices of defeat get louder. In these times, the urge to go back to feeling numb is strong, and to say that the valley is permanent after all. But Ezekiel's valley shows that setbacks don't define the journey. The bones remember what it was like to be buried. Their rising didn't take away the pain. It changed it. When things go wrong, it's important to honor your grief. Admit the pain, name the loss, and let the tears flow. It's okay to feel tired or sad. Being honest is the first thing you should do. Next is a gentle reminder. Remember the times when you could breathe again, when you found your purpose, and when hope and connection became real. Neuroscience says that when things go wrong, the brain tends to focus on the bad things. This is because survival mode narrows the mind. On purpose, go back to stories of strength, happy times, and times when you felt God's presence. Rituals, journaling, touchstones, and talking can help you remember things and feel better about yourself. Restoration requires being open-minded. The valley's vision lets you stop, change course, and start over. Not all healing is easy to see, and progress can be slow or go in circles. Even the desire to try again is a sign of hope, so celebrate small wins. When progress is measured in kindness instead of perfection, shame loses its power. Community is a safe place to go when things go wrong. When we fall, friends, mentors, support groups, and rituals can help us get back on track. Talking about your problems makes them feel less heavy, and listening to others gives you a new point of view. No one is supposed to rise by themselves. Ezekiel's army stood together, and restoration is also kept going by collective grace. Spiritually, failures aren't signs of being left behind. They're chances to get to know God better. Faith grows stronger when you have to fight for it. Character grows stronger when you have to keep going. God promises to be in the sanctuary, where prayers of doubt, questions of suffering, and laments of darkness are all welcome. The breath does not leave when the first sign of trouble appears. It is always there for every gasp. In the end, dealing with setbacks is a radical act of hope. It is the decision to go back to the valley when needed, and to believe that every return can bring about change. Despair gives way, bone by bone and breath by breath. Setbacks don't end the story of restoration, they make it real. In Ezekiel's vision, the community is always there, both as a background and as an answer. The valley is never just a bunch of lonely bones. With breath and assembly, it turns into a body, an army, and a people. Restoration in the vision is always corporate. Individual healing finds its truest fulfillment and lasting form within the bonds of community. The community is where people feel like they belong. To go from being alone to being with others, from being broken to being whole, is to find your place in a group that sees, holds, and supports your story. Community is the chorus that drowns out the voices of shame and despair, the hands that steady trembling during transformation, and the people who watch and cheer for every small step of recovery. Communities help people grow by having regular times when they get together, share, and care for each other. Rituals like celebrations, meals, memorials, and daily habits help the soul stay stable during times of change and protect the growing self. In the valley, just like in life, getting better is easier when you do things with other people, like listening, telling stories, praying, and being quiet together. These activities serve as a reminder to each member that they are not alone in their success or failure. Community is especially important when things go wrong or people fall back into old habits. When despair won't go away, the support of others is often what keeps hope alive. A community that speaks the valley's language, one that is honest about pain and patient with fear, becomes the best place for long-term renewal. Shared faith, songs, and unspoken acts of service all give tired bones new life. In a spiritual sense, community is when people can see the divine in each other. When we come together, we create the sanctuary that was promised in the vision, a place where the sacred lives not only above, but also within and among. The shared rituals of gratitude, confession, celebration, and mourning make ordinary time holy, giving every moment the chance to connect with others and grow. Community also teaches us to be humble. It tells us to know our strengths and weaknesses, to rely on others, to give help when we can, and to ask for help when we need it. The army in the valley moves forward only when each part does its job, not in competition, but in cooperation. Restoration cannot occur in isolation. It necessitates communal effort, akin to a mosaic that requires every hue and form. The role of community is built day by reaching out, being there, healing rifts, forgiving, and encouraging everyone to feel welcome. Groups can thrive when leaders create an environment of safety, honesty, and shared goals. Members who come even when they are scared, tired, or unsure build resilience. Ezekiel's prophecy doesn't end with lone heroes. Instead, it ends with a sanctuary full of people who are free to belong, serve, and dream together. Community is both the place where restored life happens and the way it happens. The people we are with echo and complete every valley we cross and every breath we take. May every person who hears this find, help build and love communities where bones are gathered, hope is real, and restoration lasts. Ezekiel's vision started out as a feast for the eyes, a valley full of dry bones, the impossible promise of restoration, and the rise of an army. This radical vision comes from the fertile ground of prophetic imagination. Imagination is not a way to get away from reality. It's a way to expand it, to see more, believe more deeply, and challenge the mind and soul to come up with new ideas, make things, and bring back the magic in things that seem broken or empty. Prophetic imagination is what gives words to desire, color to sadness, and shape to hope. Ezekiel could see possibilities where others saw only loss because of his imagination. The prophet's eyes changed how people saw the world. His words made people see futures they had missed. In every age, prophetic imagination is the source of renewal, the antidote to resignation, and the invitation to transcend mere survival. Imagination is a spiritual and neurological event. The brain, which is wired for patterns and possibilities, jumps at visions of hope, rearranges itself to fit new stories, and starts a chain reaction of motivation and resilience. Kids live by it, artists and makers use it, and prophets make it holy. To imagine is to reject the oppression of the status quo and make room for healing and new things. In Ezekiel's narrative, imagination is regulated, not inert. The prophet uses vision, thinks about promise, and puts money into language and ritual to keep creativity alive. Imagination needs care, like reading, dreaming, thinking, and listening to silence. The valley's miracle comes not from panic and desperation, but from being open to what the Spirit shows, even if it seems impossible at first. Prophetic imagination allows for change on all levels. It heals trauma for me by letting new stories in stories that aren't limited by old wounds, but are open to new meanings. It redraws maps for everyone, letting societies rethink conflict, accept differences, and share resources. It lives in the heart of every prayer, every song of hope, and every revelation. Imagination is the source of opposition. When despair says never, prophetic imagination says not yet. It is the source of every invention and act of faith, the courage that rebuilds ruins and brings enemies together. Ezekiel's valley, brought to life by it, becomes a model for every generation and every struggle that wants to see beyond their current limits. It is very important to learn how to develop prophetic imagination. Read a lot of different things, like the Bible, poetry, and stories from people who are different from you. Give yourself time to be creative by doing things like art, music, movement, and silence. Practice spiritual disciplines like meditation, prayer, and communal dreaming that help you grow your inner world. Allow the vision to grow, deepen, and take shape as you listen for the Spirit in everything. You also need bravery to have prophetic imagination. People who are attached to despair may not understand you, be skeptical of you, or challenge you. The prophet is alone at times and needs to learn to trust the vision even before it is shared. In the end, prophetic imagination is God's call to work with Him to shape the world according to His will. In every valley of dry bones, every hard place, and every moment that seems hopeless, those who dare to dream become part of the restoration and artists of new futures. May everyone who hears Ezekiel's story have their imagination sparked and remember that the valley's miracle is always close by when they practice seeing again in a new way, as only prophecy and imagination can, is the first step toward restoration. The Bible is both an anchor and a path in the ever-changing sea of human emotion. It gives us words to name, hold, and change our feelings, from the long nights of the soul to the quickening of morning joy. For Ezekiel and the exiles, sacred words influence not only their beliefs, but also their experiences of despair, hope, grief, and trust. Today, using scripture to control your emotions is still a powerful tool. It can help you find balance, strength, and clarity even in the most difficult times. Emotional regulation is basically being able to notice, understand, and change how you feel inside. It doesn't mean getting rid of strong feelings or hiding sadness. Instead, it means becoming more aware and learning how to calm, energize, or steady the mind and heart. The Bible has songs of lament that validate pain, psalms of praise that lift the spirit, proverbs of wisdom that restore perspective, and prayers of surrender that anchor in trust. When feelings threaten to take over, ancient voices join the chorus, showing how to accept and change course. The psalmist asks, "Why are you sad, O my soul?" inviting people to think about themselves honestly. In response, the text says, "Hope in God, for I shall again praise Him." Scripture reflects the natural rhythms of feeling. Turbulence calms, sorrow shifts to gratitude, and despair leans toward faith. Repetitive meditative reading, such as Lectio Divina recitation or prayer, activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which slows down the body's stress response, calms anxious thoughts, and creates new neural pathways for peace. Reciting or memorizing sacred words brings the mind back to the present, giving it a sense of control and peace. Ritualized engagement anchors the body in consistency and significance. In practice, using scripture to control your emotions can be tailored to you. Choose verses that speak directly to your current valley, and read stories or listen to songs that reflect how you feel. Make rituals like morning reflection, midday recitation, and evening gratitude that give you stable places to go. Make the wisdom of the past a part of your emotional landscape by using the language of scripture in your writing, talking to yourself, or making art. This practice is stronger in a community. Reading scripture out loud, reciting it together, or adding sacred text to group rituals makes them more powerful. We see our feelings in other people, get strength from stories of people who have survived, and are held by the hope and memory of being saved. In a spiritual sense, the Bible links temporary feelings to lasting truths. We don't deny emotional storms, we reframe them. Every shadow has a promise that goes with it. Love, justice, and mercy are steady notes that help us stay grounded, even when things are crazy inside. May everyone who walks through valleys of dry bones find not escape, but food in the Bible. May holy words calm your heart, clear your mind, and give you back your sense of belonging and hope until the Spirit comes back with the promise of new life. Restoration personal. Communal spiritual rarely occurs as a singular, dramatic event. It happens more often through what Eugene Peterson called a long obedience in the same direction. Ezekiel's vision, with its dramatic breath and assembly, is part of a bigger pattern. Faithful perseverance, slow progress, and endurance that lasts through discouragement and temptation. You can't cross the valley of dry bones in one night. It takes dedication to rise up an army, live in peace, and build a sanctuary even when things get tough. In real life, restoration is a daily job, making small choices, trusting others over and over, and gently returning to hope after failing. Renewal doesn't happen all at once. It takes shape in the everyday things we do, like habits, rituals, relationships, and being honest with ourselves. Obedience is not mindless compliance. It is a deliberate response to love and commitment. It is the discipline of going back to what is true, life-giving, and holy over and over again. This requires patience to wait for change, humility to accept what can't be rushed, and faith to believe that repetition is not useless, but a way to grow. Like Ezekiel's listeners, you will have setbacks and disappointments. The story asks if you will keep going. Will you stick to the rhythm of breath and bone, the slow path to peace, and the long process of rebuilding communities? The long obedience is made up of persistence, resilience, and the refusal to give up on the journey because of a setback or silence. In practical terms, this means showing up, going back to daily practice, looking for connection, and speaking hope when things seem hopeless. The work of blessing and restoring builds on itself over time, getting stronger with each repetition. There are steps, not jumps, across the valley. Long obedience builds a spiritual sanctuary, both inside and outside of us. It builds trust, changes habits, and gives hope when others fail. The promise of "I am with you" is made stronger by long-term commitment, which is the basis for all healing. As Ezekiel's vision comes to an end, it calls for endurance not as a burden, but as an invitation to be part of a story that is longer and deeper than any valley he has ever seen. May everyone who hears be given the patience to wait for the journey, even when it takes a long time to breathe again. May the long obedience, step by step, bone by bone, bring you life, peace, and a sense of belonging that lasts. Sometimes the promise of the valley, renewal, breath, and reunion seems very far away. Restoration seems to be taking longer than it should, even though the prayer is sincere and the desire is strong. Even though Ezekiel's story has a happy ending, it honors these times of distance. The bones lay long in the dust. Their story is all about waiting. When restoration seems far away, you need to move slowly, toward yourself, toward others, and even toward God. The first thing to do is not to force hope, but to admit that it is not there without shame. Honest lamentation constitutes an act of faith, signifying trust that desolation is not eternal. There are many such cries in the Psalms, "How long, O Lord?" echoing the pain of every heart that is waiting. Being far away doesn't mean leaving someone behind. A delay is not the same as a denial. The story of the valley shows us that time isn't the enemy of change. It's its secret friend. Some wounds heal below the surface, and some hope grows where no one can see it yet. As we endure distance, we gain new depth, wisdom, and compassion, gifts that can't be rushed. When restoration seems far away, the best thing to do is to take care of what is close by. Focus on small things you do every day, like reading in the morning light, eating together, crying in front of others, moving slowly, or saying or getting one word of encouragement. These are not things that will get in your way. They are seeds. What is small today could be the start of something big tomorrow. This valley needs community. When you feel like you can't breathe, being with someone who understands, sharing silence or honest doubt with others, these things can save your life. When you travel through the valley with someone else, it's not as lonely. The longest times of silence can be broken by testimonies, prayers, and stories of people who have waited and seen return. Distance is a recurring theme in spirituality, such as the wilderness, exile, and the years of silence between promise and fulfillment. It's not the lack of feeling that matters. It's the stubborn return to trust even when things are hard. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. Faith is improved, strengthened, and made more real in the dark. When restoration seems far away, patience turns into prayer. It is the act of waiting with open hands, letting each day be enough, and not looking down on small blessings or beginnings. The breath comes back on its own time, sometimes all at once, but most of the time slowly, until the air in the valley is full again. May everyone who is waiting for restoration, tired of waiting and tired of being quiet, find the strength to wait honestly and live gently. There is still more to the story. We don't forget the bones. The breath is still promised. Restoration's journey, which goes from bones to breath, from exile to homecoming, doesn't end with one victory, but with deep integration. Ezekiel's vision is not a way to get away from pain forever or a quick spiritual high. Instead, it is an invitation to live every day in the wholeness that has been hard-won. The last step in the integration process is when all the broken pieces fit together. All the lessons are learned, and every breath is kept as a promise. Putting things together is more than just fixing things. Weaving together memories of loss, stories of revival, daily life rituals, and the presence of the sacred is what it is. It is accepting that being alive means having both pain and joy. In the integrated life, scars are signs that you survived and that you crossed the valley and got your breath back. No experience is wasted. Every chapter stays with you and every step has a purpose. Integration is good for your mind. The nervous system finds a new level of calm. Thoughts and feelings that were all over the place become clearer. People are less likely to hide and more likely to take risks and rest. Old triggers lose their power, but new habits like gratitude, honesty, and patience help you stay true to yourself. The self no longer needs to be split up. It can come back together both inside and out. This is the shalom that was promised at the end of the journey. Nothing is missing, nothing is broken, and everything is at peace. The shadows in the valley remind us to appreciate the light. Sanctuary is more than just a place. It's a way of being faith in action, love in action, and everyday life changed by a holy encounter. In practice, final integration is lived in silence. It isn't always great. The way one greets the morning, the peace that comes from conflict, and the ability to see one's own reflection with kindness are all parts of this. Practicing rituals of gratitude, connection, and care for the body, mind, and others keeps wholeness. Ezekiel's prophecy ends with a promise and a command. Live in the newness you have received. Protect the breath, keep memory alive, and nurture the unity. Don't forget the valley. It's now a part of your strength. As you go through life, let hope, humility, and the sacred always be with you. May every journey end in this last integration. A life of healing, purpose, community, and peace. May the valley never have the last word. May the Spirit always bring breath and a sense of belonging. Let old words flow through you. Let prophecy, promise, and poetry bring life back to your own dry bones. Ezekiel's vision isn't just about the past. Restoration is always happening and always possible. Use the words you once spoke as the basis for your hope, the beat of your healing, and the song of your journey. Let them affect how you pray, how you interact with others, and how you live your life every day. As you sing them, this old song becomes new, your story, your breath, and your future. Restoration is for those who remember, imagine, and are brave enough to let old words become real. If you want more stories that wrestle with mercy, with justice, and with the messy, beautiful complexities of faith, then go ahead and subscribe to this channel and ring that notification bell. It's absolutely free, and it helps these narratives keep sailing to new shores, reaching more people who need to hear them. And here's another question for the comments. Who is the Nineveh person or group in your life, the one you struggle to wish well? Let's practice surrender and radical compassion together.